So you didn't get the job. You didn't even get the promotion. They didn't choose your ideal. Someone you respected told you you weren't ready. And maybe the hardest part wasn't hearing the no. Maybe the hardest part was everything you started telling yourself afterwards, because rejection happens once, but sometimes we reject ourselves hundreds of times afterwards. We replay it. We question ourselves. We start looking for evidence that maybe, just maybe they're right. Here's what nobody told you. You've been reading the scoreboard wrong. Rejection can tell you what happened in that moment. It cannot tell you who that moment is building you to become. Imagine this. You show up to the interview 15 minutes early. You're prepared. You're fresh to death. You've done your research. You've practiced your questions. And you know what? You're ready to go. But the interview time comes and nobody joins. 5 minutes pass, then 10 minutes. Okay, now you're starting to think to yourself, okay, something must be wrong here. Therefore, you go through your email, you find the recruiter's contact information, and you reach out. The recruiter tells you something came up with the hiring manager, but he'll be joining the call in about 5 to 10 minutes. And immediately something inside you said, man, I should just reschedule this. Not because you're upset, not because you want it to be difficult. You just know that if something important came up, you would want the hiring manager to be fully present, and you want to be fully present without feeling like you have to rush through your answers. But you ignore that instinct. You tell yourself, oh, it's okay. Let's just go ahead and do the interview. And therefore, the interview starts. But just like you thought, it was a total train wreck. At one point, the hiring manager gets up while he's still on camera and starts walking. And you're thinking to yourself, where is he going? And then he says, oh, I need to go pick up my son, but we can keep talking. And then at that moment right there, you know, the interview was really basically over. Technically, you're still talking, you're still answering questions, but you no longer have the conversation you prepared for. A little while later, you reach out to the recruiter to find out where they're at in the decision-making process. But while you're on the phone with the recruiter, all of a sudden you hear, ding. That was an email to your inbox. It was actually a rejection letter. See, now this is where it gets interesting. The rejection wasn't what frustrated me. I've been rejected before. What frustrated me was knowing that my instincts had already told me what to do, reschedule. Well, the environment just wasn't right. You know, neither one of us was going to be fully present, but because you wanted the opportunity, you ignored your own judgment. And therefore, the biggest lesson I walked away with wasn't, how do I make sure this never happens to me again? It was, why didn't I trust myself when I already knew? Before we unpack today's episode, family, if you're ready to move forward beyond certifications and become the leader you and your team deserves, the Project Management Lab exists to help project managers and leaders replace uncertainty with confidence. I've included some resources in the description to help you continue your journey toward becoming the project manager you want to become. Now, let's get back to this journey. Here's a reflection, family. I want you to think about a rejection you've experienced. Maybe it was a job, a promotion, an opportunity, or even an idea. Something you genuinely wanted. Now, don't ask yourself why they rejected you. I want you to ask yourself something different. What did the rejection teach you about trusting yourself? Was there something you already knew, something you saw, something you felt? Maybe you recognize a red flag, but you just ignored it because you wanted the opportunity. Maybe you knew you weren't prepared, but you hope you could push through it anyway. Maybe you knew the opportunity wasn't right for you, but being chosen felt more important than choosing what was right for you. See, because sometimes rejection isn't teaching you how to try harder. Sometimes rejection is teaching you how to trust yourself much sooner. Quick question. Have you ever looked back at rejection and realized that somewhere along the way you ignored something you already knew? Principle number 1, rejection can teach you to trust yourself. See, that's what happened to me, family. The lesson from the interview wasn't simply that I didn't get the job. The lesson was that before the interview even started, my judgment was telling me these aren't the right conditions, but I wanted the opportunity. And when we really want something, sometimes we just start negotiating against our own better judgment. We see the red flags, but we don't want to appear too difficult. We recognize the problem, but we don't want to lose the opportunity. Therefore, we override ourselves. Then the rejection comes and we spend all of our time analyzing what they decided instead of examining what we ignored. Here's the lesson, family. Sometimes the lesson isn't that you made the wrong decision. It's that you already knew the right decision and just didn't trust yourself enough to make it. Rejection can expose the places where you still need to develop self-trust. See, sometimes rejection isn't teaching you to try harder. It's teaching you to trust yourself sooner. Family, I'm going to park here parenthetically and say this. This is one of the things that I've had a challenge through my life is saying, I need to trust myself more. You have to develop that self-trust because when you develop that self-trust, it doesn't happen overnight. And it definitely doesn't happen over a year, but it happens. You get lessons, you get opportunities to develop that self-trust. So I want to let you know when you fall down and you will, and then you have to make that tough decision. Do I trust myself again, even though I made the best decision based on the information that I had? And most of the time, when you're making a decision, not a choice, when we are making a decision, we try to make the best decision based on the information that we have. And then when we find out that that wasn't really a good decision, now we start doubting ourselves. And now that self-trust starts becoming ruined. Maybe I'm just talking to myself, but I hope that I'm also talking to somebody else out there that has been through something in life. All right, here's 2 actionable tips I'd love for you to experiment with. Tip number 1, first, identify what you knew before you even knew the outcome. Go back before the rejection. What did you notice? What questions did you have? What instinct did you override? Don't rewrite history based on the outcome. Identify what information was genuinely available to you at the time. Tip number 2, decide now what you'll do different next time. Maybe you'll ask another question. Maybe you'll request more information. Maybe you'll just reschedule, or maybe, just maybe, you'll actually walk away. Here's my professional advice. As project managers and leaders, self-trust doesn't mean assuming you're always right. It means respecting your judgment enough to investigate what you're seeing. If something feels wrong on a project, don't ignore it because everyone else seems comfortable. Ask the question, validate the assumption, surface the risk. Professional maturity isn't knowing you're always right. It's being willing to investigate when something tells you something is just not right. But rejection can create another problem. Because if we're not careful, we stop evaluating what happened and start evaluating who we are, which brings me to principle number 2. But before we get to principle number 2, I have a question. When you were rejected, did you evaluate the outcome or did you start evaluating yourself? Principle number 2, rejection records an outcome, not an identity. See, there's a massive difference between I was selected and, oh, well, I'm not good enough. The first statement describes what happened. The second statement describes who you decided you are because it happened. You didn't get the promotion. Therefore, you start questioning whether your leadership material, your ideal wasn't selected. Therefore, you decide maybe your ideals aren't valuable. You didn't get the job. Therefore, you start questioning whether your experience, well, if it even matters. That's how an external score becomes an internal identity. But the scoreboard only recorded one outcome. You gave the outcome its meaning. Here's a lesson, family. The scoreboard can record what happened, but be careful allowing it to write who you are. Rejection is information, sometimes painful information, sometimes useful information, but information and identity are not the same thing. I'll say that again. Information and identity are not the same thing. Experiment with these 2 actionable tips. Tip number 1, separate the fact from the story. Write down what actually happened. I wasn't selected. Then write down what you've been telling yourself because of it. Is it because I'm not qualified? Now I want you to ask yourself, do I have evidence for the second statement or did I create it from the first? Tip number 2, extract the feedback without absorbing the identity. Maybe your interview skills need work. Maybe your communication needs improvement. Maybe you genuinely just wasn't ready. Good. Now you have something you can go develop. Use the feedback to improve your performance, not destroy your confidence. Here's my professional advice, family. Project managers do this all the time in project outcomes. A project misses a milestone. That doesn't automatically mean you're a terrible project manager, but it does mean something happened that deserves an examination. What failed? What did we miss? What assumptions was wrong? What will we change? Treat personal rejection with the same obsessive devotion. Expect the outcome without attacking the person, especially when the person you're attacking is yourself. But now I want to make this very uncomfortable for everyone. What if rejection was accurate? What if you were really not ready? What if someone else really was better? Does that mean the scoreboard gets the final word? Not even close. But let me ask you a question. What if they were right about you that day, but completely wrong about who you could become? Principle number 3, they're scoring today, you're building tomorrow. This is where our relationship with rejection has to mature. Not because person who rejects us is a villain. Sometimes you weren't ready. Sometimes your presentation wasn't strong enough. Sometimes someone else deserved the opportunity, and sometimes the answer genuinely needed to be no. But here's where we make the mistake. We take an accurate evaluation of ourselves at one point in time and turn it into a prediction of our future. Someone says you're not ready for leadership. Maybe they're right today. Therefore, the question is, how dare they say I'm not ready? The better question is what will I need to build so that statement no longer is true? That's what we call development. Here's a lesson, fam. Today's score can be completely accurate and still be incomplete. The person evaluating today only has access to the evidence you're producing today. They haven't seen who you become through another year of experience. They haven't seen the difficult projects you're going to lead. They haven't seen the mistakes you're going to learn from. They haven't seen the confidence you're going to develop. They're scoring today, and you are building tomorrow. Here's 2 actionable tips I love for your experiment. Turn no into not yet. Ooh, I like that, family. This is not wishful thinking. Ask a development question. What specifically would need to change for you to be ready today? Is that skills, experience, communication, leadership, knowledge? Find the gap and start building. Actionable tip number 2, keep a longer scoreboard. Ooh, I like that, family. See, we don't want to measure your development from one interview, one project, one promotion, or one quarter. Look at who you were a year ago. What can you handle today that would have overwhelmed you then? What conversations can you have now that you used to avoid? Measure trajectory, not just moments. Here's my professional advice. Your career will contain scores you don't like, performance reviews. Oh, I've been there. Failed projects. Oh, man, I've been there. Rejection of applications. Yes, again, I've been there. Missed promotions. Yeah, they looked over me, but stakeholder feedback, that's another one. Those scores matter. But experienced leaders learn to distinguish between a data point and a destination. Use today's score to determine what you need to work on tomorrow. Don't use today's score to determine whether tomorrow is possible. So now, family, we're back where we started. The rejection happened. The score is already on the board. We can't change that. But maybe we've been asking the wrong question about what it means. Here's my final reflection. Going back to the rejection you thought about at the beginning of this episode, the job, the promotion, the opportunity, the ideal, whatever it was. But don't ask, why didn't they choose me? I want you to ask a better question. Who have I become because they didn't choose me? What did you learn? What did you trust about yourself? What did you improve? What standard changed? What can you recognize today that you couldn't recognize then? And what version of you exists today that might not exist if you've gotten the yes you wanted back then? Because maybe the scoreboard was accurately recording what happened that day. But if you couldn't record what happened next, it couldn't record the development. It couldn't record the actual lessons you learned. And it couldn't record the confidence. It couldn't even record the person you were becoming. A rejection can tell you that you didn't win that moment. It couldn't tell you what that moment is building you to become. Maybe you weren't being rejected from your future. Maybe you were being built for it. Oh, I like that, family. As we come to a close, I want to be transparent with you. Rejection hurts. I mean, there's no way to sugarcoat. I mean, it hurts. I'm not going to tell you to pretend that it doesn't. But the next time you hear no, don't just ask what rejection took away. Ask, what is the rejection requiring me to build? Trust your judgment. Separate the outcome from your identity. And remember, today's score may be accurate, but it's incomplete. The scoreboard is information. It's not identity. And today's score is not the final score. If you're ready to move forward, family, beyond certifications and become the leader your team deserves, The Project Management Lab exists to help project managers as well as leaders replace uncertainty with confidence. I've included some resources in the description to help you continue your journey toward becoming the leader and project manager you want to become. And remember, family, keep learning, keep experiencing, keep building one brick at a time. And you know the model here: sets and reps. Be talent when talent doesn't do the reps. So if you're new to the episode, I go by the name ED. For you smart and intelligent folks out there, hey, listen, that just simply means Ed. Until next time.